Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. Arya Lowell sat at the far end of her parents' polished mahogany dining table, a glittering New Year's Eve chandelier reflecting tiny sparks off every wine glass. The air hummed with laughter, clinking forks, and the smug comfort of people certain the night would end exactly the way they wanted. Arya, 31, the oldest child, the reliable one, listened quietly as her father Jasper stood, clearing his throat as if he were about to announce a promotion ceremony. "Starting this year," Jasper said, voice booming with confidence, "your support for Caleb will become a formal arrangement." Every relative paused mid-bite, forks frozen. "He is under a great deal of pressure already." Arya blinked slowly. Her mother Denise didn't even bother looking at her. "And if you choose to refuse," Denise added sharply, "don't expect to be part of this family anymore." The room tensed. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to quiet demand. Arya felt something she hadn't before. Not fear, not anger, but clarity, like a switch had clicked into place. She stood, tapping her glass lightly. "Then," she said with a calm smile that unnerved everyone, "let this be my final toast, and the last scent any of you ever see from me." A deep breath sucked through the room like wind before a storm. Someone muttered, "She's joking." But even they didn't believe it. Arya remained perfectly still, glass in hand, spine straight, watching shock ripple across faces that had long taken her obedience as guaranteed. Her brother Caleb stared down at his champagne, never lifting his eyes, never saying a word, because silence had always protected him. And with that one declaration, Arya felt the entire script of her life begin to flip. Arya left the dinner table with a dignity that felt unfamiliar but right, while conversations behind her splintered into panicked whispers. She walked down the long corridor of her parents' mansion, high heels tapping like a countdown clock, coat already wrapped around her shoulders before anyone could summon the courage to stop her. In her car, she exhaled a long, measured breath she didn't realize she was holding. As she drove through the glittering city streets, her phone vibrated nonstop, calls from her mother, texts from her father, and guilt-soaked paragraphs from Caleb. She didn't read a single one. Instead, she played her favorite playlist, a soft instrumental mix that reminded her she had a life outside their demands. She realized how normal it had felt to them to ask, no, expect, her to sacrifice her future for her brother's repeated mistakes. Denise's threat had felt rehearsed, like they'd been waiting for the perfect moment to deliver it. Arya imagined the conversations that would follow after she left. Jasper shaking his head, saying she'd come to her senses. Denise listing all the reasons Arya owed them. Caleb just sitting there, silent because he'd never faced a problem alone in his life. Support, they called it. Arya called it what it always was, a leash. At a red light, she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark eyes steady, chin lifted. "Why did I let it last this long?" she whispered to herself. And the truth hit her like headlights through fog, because somewhere inside, she still believed being the responsible one meant staying loyal, no matter how deeply it cost her. But tonight, loyalty wasn't enough to bury the truth anymore. At dawn, Arya was already awake, sitting at her small kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, waiting for the inevitable knock she knew was coming. And right on schedule, her mother arrived. Denise didn't greet her. She barged inside, still dressed in last night's formal gown beneath a heavy coat. "We need to talk," she snapped, dropping her purse on the counter. Arya's calm unsettled her mother more than anything. "Caleb barely slept," Denise began pacing. "Your father is mortified. What you did last night, do you have any idea how it looks?" Arya leaned back and asked quietly, "How it looks to who?" Denise blinked, thrown off for a moment, then rolled back into accusation mode. To everyone, to family, to friends, people will think we aren't united. Arya stirred her coffee. We aren't, she said simply. Denise's eyes narrowed. Your brother is struggling. You make good money. You'll recover. He won't. Arya almost laughed at how easily her mother admitted what they'd always believed, that Arya existed to prop up Caleb's failures. So I should sacrifice my life so he doesn't feel discomfort, she asked. Denise waved her hand dramatically. Stop being dramatic. This is what family does. Arya held her gaze. No, this is what you expect of me. Family gives and receives. I've only ever done the giving. Denise's jaw tightened. You're acting selfish. No, Arya said softly, I'm acting equal. And for the first time, her mother had no prepared line to throw back. She stood frozen, clutching her purse like a shield. You'll regret this, she hissed. Arya opened the door for her. Maybe, but at least it'll be my decision, not pressure disguised as love. That was the moment Denise realized her oldest child was done being useful, and she left without saying goodbye. The fallout spread faster than Arya expected. By the third day, Jasper and Denise hosted an emergency family gathering, summoning aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone willing to play the audience. Arya walked into the living room and recognized the setup instantly. Everyone seated like a courtroom, stiff backs and polite smiles hiding anticipation for the drama about to unfold. Jasper stood in the center, arms folded. We're deeply concerned about Arya's recent actions, he announced, voice full of false sorrow. He used her full name, Arya Lynette Lowell, as if her first name alone no longer belonged to them. She's abandoned her brother during a fragile time. Denise chimed in, eyes red but dry. Murmurs swelled. An aunt gasped softly. After everything we've done for her, Jasper added, and the room nodded like actors reading from a script. Arya lifted her hand to speak, but Denise raised hers first. This isn't a debate. You owe your brother support. Family sacrifice isn't optional. Caleb sat on the couch beside their parents, his expression a carefully crafted mixture of wounded sadness and helplessness. Arya, he said quietly, why are you doing this to me? The words stung, not because of their meaning, but because Caleb genuinely believed them. Years of shielding had convinced him the world owed him comfort. Arya stood still, hands clasped, heart pounding with humiliation, but also with awakening. She scanned the faces in the room, realizing not one person there knew how many times her accounts had saved Caleb, how many nights she'd answered phone calls no one else wanted to handle, how many opportunities she'd lost while cushioning his falls. She didn't defend herself, because suddenly she understood there was no truth they wanted to hear, and silence, heavy and deliberate, became her final answer. That night, Arya returned home to her small apartment, closed the door, and leaned against it as the quiet wrapped around her like a blanket. She didn't cry. She didn't pace or panic. She simply sat on the floor in her coat and replayed every accusation thrown at her. Ungrateful, selfish, abandoning. None of those words matched the memories she carried. Late-night transfers, last-minute loans, covering Caleb's rent when he lied about losing checks, paying his legal fees when one of his business ideas violated licensing laws. The next morning, she opened her laptop and pulled up her online banking history. 7 years of transactions, each one a breadcrumb leading back to her family's unspoken expectation. Arya pays, Caleb mistakes, Jasper excuses, Denise demands. She created a document listing every payment, each entry growing longer than the last. And for the first time she saw the truth organized neatly on a screen, and the total nearly made her dizzy. She found the contract she'd co-signed last year because her father had assured her it was harmless. Reading it carefully now, she discovered clauses that could drag her into responsibility for debts she never created, and in that instant her fear evaporated. They didn't protect me, she whispered. They used me. Instead of calling and arguing, she sent a short email to her bank, formally cutting all financial ties to Caleb. Then she contacted a lawyer, not to threaten anyone, but to remove her name from every obligation she had been guilted into sharing. When she hit send, a strange peace settled over her. Arya finally understood she didn't have to save anyone whose entire survival depended on her drowning quietly beneath them, and she was done sinking. 2 days after the lawyer sent confirmation, Arya's phone rang again. This time it was her father. Jasper's voice, normally smooth and commanding, sounded thin and clipped. "What did you do?" he demanded without a greeting. Arya placed him on speaker and continued meal prepping like she was discussing grocery items, not the collapse of her family's plan. "I stopped being responsible for Caleb," she replied calmly. Jasper exhaled sharply. "You didn't need a lawyer. You could have talked to us." Arya paused. "I tried talking. For years." There was a long silence, followed by a voice she had never heard in her father, fear peeking beneath anger. "Payments are bouncing," he said. "Your brother has deadlines." Arya stirred her food slowly. "Those deadlines were always his," she reminded him. Jasper's temper snapped. "Don't throw away family over money." Arya laughed bitterly. "That's exactly why I left, because everything between us became money." Jasper tried one last tactic. "Think about the consequences. Caleb is not equipped for this." Arya leaned on the counter. "Maybe that's why he needs to stand on his own now." Jasper fell silent again, and this time Arya could practically hear him realizing something devastating. His daughter wasn't bluffing, panicking, or raging. She was done. "So that's it," he whispered. Arya nodded, even though he couldn't see. "Yes, that's it." Jasper ended the call without saying goodbye, and Arya stood alone in her kitchen, feeling something she had waited years to feel: relief. The fallout escalated into panic. The next evening, someone knocked on Arya's door so loudly she thought it was a neighbor in crisis. When she looked through the peephole, she froze. Jasper and Denise stood outside together, stiff-backed and strangely unsure. Arya opened the door, cautiously. "What's wrong?" she asked, though she already knew. Denise wasted no time. "You didn't need to take it this far," she said, sounding furious and frightened at the same time. Jasper stared at the floor, like the tiles might offer a solution. "Caleb is in serious trouble," he said softly. "He's facing consequences he can't handle." Arya raised a brow. "You mean consequences he should have faced years ago?" Denise pressed forward. "He needs you. You're his sister." Arya shook her head gently. "I already was his sister. I was his bank account. I was his shield. I was the reason he never learned to stand up." Jasper's voice cracked in a way Arya had never heard. "So you're just walking away?" Arya felt a sharp ache in her chest, not from guilt, but from how deeply she'd wanted them to understand her before tonight. "No," she answered quietly, "I'm walking forward." Denise reached for her arm like she was trying to physically drag her back into the old role, but Arya stepped away. "I love you," Arya said softly, "but love is not a lifetime bill." The words hung in the air, heavy, thick, final. Her parents looked at her as if they didn't recognize her, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't bending beneath them. In the days that followed, Arya experienced a strange kind of calm. Her phone vibrated far less than she expected. First came a few guilt-filled texts from Denise. "You'll regret this." Then, "We did our best raising you." And finally the classic weapon. "Your brother is family whether you like it or not." Arya didn't respond to any. Soon, the messages switched to silence, and that silence felt like a door slowly closing behind her. Meanwhile, word spread quietly among extended family. An aunt sent a message that simply read, "Praying for you," which Arya found both kind and confusing. A cousin wrote, "Wish I had your courage," which landed more deeply than she admitted. And then came the real proof that things had shifted. Caleb himself stopped calling. Not a single attempt at apology, understanding, or responsibility. Nothing. Arya realized she had been right all along. He hadn't wanted her support. He had wanted her invisibility. As long as she carried the burden, he never had to feel the weight of his own choices. One evening, Arya sat in her living room with a cup of tea and looked around at her quiet space. "Is this what peace feels like?" she whispered. She thought of all the years she'd spent running to rescue people who refused to rescue themselves. She thought of all the times she'd stayed silent instead of drawing boundaries. And she felt something she hadn't tasted since childhood. Freedom that didn't require permission. 2 weeks after Arya cut ties, she received the update she had been expecting. From the same aunt who always carried family gossip like it was a holy calling. "Caleb finally faced things on his own," the message read. "He's working now. And your parents aren't happy, but they're quiet." Arya stared at the text, stunned not by the content, but by the realization that the world hadn't fallen apart without her. Instead, people adjusted the moment she stopped cushioning them. Later that night, she met her friend Sienna for dinner, the first real outing she'd allowed herself in months without checking her account balance in fear. Sienna clinked her glass against Arya's. "You look lighter," she said with a smile. Arya laughed softly. "Feels like I dropped a world off my back." Sienna leaned forward. "Did they apologize?" Arya shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe never." Sienna shrugged. "Then, think about this. Maybe the apology you needed was your own." Arya let the word settle. She remembered that final dinner, the threats masquerading as family loyalty, and the way she stood without her voice shaking. "I guess," she whispered, "I finally believed I deserved my own life." She walked home under streetlights that flickered against cool pavement, and she felt something shift inside her permanently. The belief that her boundaries weren't betrayal. They were survival. On New Year's Day, exactly 1 year after the night everything shattered, Arya stood at her apartment window overlooking a quiet, sleeping city. She poured a glass of deep red wine and held it gently between her palms. There was no party, no family waiting for her, no demanding voices ready to twist gratitude into obligation. Just the city, the dawn, and her own heartbeat reminding her she belonged to herself now. She thought of Caleb, somewhere learning the language of consequences. She thought of Jasper and Denise, somewhere stunned that a daughter could step away without crumbling. And she thought of the girl she used to be, the obedient daughter who flinched at disappointing anyone. Arya raised her glass slowly. "To endings," she whispered, smiling to herself, "and to never confusing love with control again." She took a sip and closed her eyes, letting the warmth spread through her chest. The year had begun in silence, but this silence was hers, earned, chosen, and free of any weight except her own steady breath. And for the first time since childhood, Arya Lowell felt like she was finally, unapologetically living. Spring arrived quietly, months after Arya stepped away, and with it came the moment she never expected. One afternoon, as she unpacked groceries in her kitchen, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her chest nudged her to answer. "Hello," she said cautiously. A familiar voice breathed in her ear, "Caleb." Not the confident, entitled tone she had known for years, but a tired, unsteady whisper. "Arya, I know you don't owe me a thing," he began slowly, like each word weighed more than he could hold. "But I wanted to say, I get it now." Arya leaned against the counter, heart thudding, not from anger, but disbelief. Caleb took another shaky breath. "I always thought you'd fix everything. I thought that's what big sisters did. I didn't know I was hurting you." Arya swallowed. "Caleb, I didn't want to walk away from you," she said softly. "I wanted you to walk beside me." There was a long pause on the line. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm trying this time. I got a job, nothing fancy, but it's mine." Arya smiled gently, the kind that didn't ache. "Good," she replied. "I'm glad." Caleb hesitated. "I can't promise I won't fall again, but I'm not dragging you with me anymore." Arya closed her eyes, letting relief wash through her body like a warm tide. That's all I ever needed. They didn't say goodbye dramatically. Caleb simply exhaled and said, "Take care, Ari." And for the first time in years, when the call ended, Arya didn't feel guilty for hanging up. She felt proud. Summer hit the city with heat waves and golden light, and Arya found herself adjusting to a life she had once been afraid to imagine. She traveled for the first time using money she hadn't already mentally assigned to someone else. Weekends at the coast, new restaurants, books she bought without checking price tags twice. She even started taking pottery classes on Tuesday nights, her hands sinking into clay as laughter filled the studio. One evening after class, she noticed an older man lingering near the sidewalk, someone who resembled Jasper in posture if not in age. A pang shot through her, not of regret, but of recognition. Family lived in her memory even when no one called. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail, addressed in her father's handwriting. She set it on her table and simply stared at it, not ready to invite the past back too quickly. Finally, she opened it slowly. Jasper's writing was shaky, but the message clear. "I don't know how to talk to you without expecting something. I'm learning. Your mother is learning too. We are not ready to apologize properly, but we know enough to stop blaming you." Arya read it twice, stunned by its unexpected honesty. At the bottom he had written, almost childlike, "I hope we earn a chance to be in your life again. Not because we need you, but because we want to." Arya folded the letter gently and placed it inside a drawer, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. Healing didn't have to rush. She realized she didn't need reconciliation instantly. She only needed space to choose when she was ready. By the time autumn leaves started falling, Arya felt like a different version of herself. Still recognizable. Still the woman who worked hard and cared deeply, but finally someone who belonged fully to her own life. On a crisp evening, she walked through the city park with a hot chocolate in hand, watching children run through piles of leaves while parents laughed nearby. She sat on a bench, breathing in the scent of maple and cool air, and thought about her journey. She thought of the girl who had once believed love required sacrifice without limit. She thought of the woman who had stood up in a room full of relatives and chosen herself. And she thought of the family she still hoped would one day learn to love her without measuring her worth in dollars and duties. As she rose to leave, she whispered gently into the wind, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, but to every moment, good and painful, that forced her to grow. She headed home feeling light, knowing she didn't need an ending written by anyone else. She had already rewritten her own story, and somewhere in her heart she held a hope, not desperate, not dependent, but quiet and steady, that if her family ever returned, it would be on new terms, built on respect instead of obligation. Until then, Arya walked forward, free, grounded, and finally completely her own. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.